using the pub stuff was really great for, we thought, for routing messages worked really well for us. And also really using pub stuff internally for synchronizing different bits of state that needed to be synchronized worked really well as well. So thank you very much for coming. And,
time for some questions, so anyone? Okay, I've got a question. What sort of architecture do you use for Redis? How many instances do you have running? And
well, actually, we've only got 2 instances,
okay,
the master and the slave. So we don't end up storing that much data. It's only a few hundred megabytes of data in Redis. But what we do end up having quite a lot of operations against Redis. I think we're about 25 million a day, so that kind of volume. But actually, I mean, for example, with RabbitMQ, we were running kind of a dedicated host for that. But using Redis, it's basically sitting there on the same host as other processes, so it seems to be, extremely efficient.
On redundancy of messages and stuff, if you don't have any consumers or subscribers at the other end, are the messages effectively lost? If the consumers go down, I suppose with RabbitMQ you could buffer them in the queue. Are there any plans to use Redis with this? So you can't use it internally with Redis, but have you got any plans to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some plans. I mean, obviously we could use kind of the list list pushing and that kind of thing to store message histories, and there's a few plans around things like that, but nothing concrete at this stage.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah, certainly if you need to do that kind of queuing stuff and kind of more complex kind of routing for messages.
Would you say lists are an appropriate kind of application of that, or they're not really suited to that kind of role?
What do you mean?
Well, lists are just lists, but would you say that they're actually suited to buffering of large scales of messages if you have?
Well, I mean, obviously you are pushing that onto memory, so it is being persisted. But I mean, Redis is extremely fast. I mean, we've used lists in the past to kind of do kind of communication between processes, where you actually, it's really important that a message gets dealt with, and you can't just have it disappear into the ether. And I mean, they work great. I mean, I haven't actually benchmarked lists versus PubSub. I suspect that PubSub is a lot faster. But I would imagine that you probably get pretty good numbers out of lists and blocking pop operations and that kind of thing as well. Yeah.
So I was just wondering about the failover that you mentioned. Did you have to do you roll your own with the replication failover, or is there a solution out there? Or?
Yeah, we kind of roll our own.
Yeah.
So it's, I wish someone would kind of, well, I think everyone's basically waiting for the cluster support to come out. But yeah, I mean, it's, the basic idea is that you assign, manually or however the master and the slave, and then the slave. How does it work again? We write some data. We always maintain a connection to the slave, and then we write some data to the slave, so that then you can kind of do some kind of election, so that at least you have some kind of certainty that everyone is kind of sharing the same view. I'm sure there's slight race conditions in it, but it's kind of good enough for us. I mean, basically, when you tested it, if you take the master down, it would fold over. So that's, and then so effectively all of the so the primary process is then responsible for promoting the old slave to master, and then storing the new config, so that then
So that's actually in your application.
Yeah. So it's not ideal, but I mean, actually, it's not been needed, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a constraint at the moment that if you're using Redis in production, you kind of have to do a bit of work in that area, which is a nightmare.
It's probably quite a tough question. You might not have thought about it yet,
right.
But you say you're only working on 2 boxes at the moment, one master, one slave.
Yeah.
There's only so far that you'll be able to scale vertically.
Yeah.
Have you got any plans for scaling Redis horizontally across multiple instances?
Yeah, I mean, there's so obviously you can shard by key, which is kind of obvious.
Would you use some sort of consistent hashing with that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, some kind of hash ring presumably would do the job. The other thing is that maybe that we hit the bottom. I mean, I don't know where we hit the bottleneck first. It may be that we hit it on routing performance, and you can kind of scale that quite nicely by using slaves. So you can, if you subscribe to the slave, then all the publish events get sent to the slaves, which is very so it sort of fans out, and then you do the routing, which might be expensive if you have very large numbers of connections, sort of at the leaves. So there's a few different options, but we haven't had to. We're quite a long way away.
When do you expect to hit that?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, you look at the CPU Redis, and it's just
after Redis clusters out.
Probably, yeah, exactly. So much
Hopefully.
easier. Exactly. Hardly good for us, yeah. Yeah.
Is there any specific reason you're flushing the stats to MySQL in the end rather than just leaving it in Redis?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. I mean, memory is cheap, but I don't believe it's that cheap. So, I mean, we've got.
True.
I mean, we've got. I can't remember how many gigabytes of stats, but I mean, the memory is cheap, but storing all that stuff in Redis just seems crazy because most of the time it's not accessed. And also, it's just so much easier to query it in SQL.
That's true, depending on how complicated it is.
Yeah. And also, we want to kind of aggregate it and access it over kind of create averages over given region over periods of time, and doing that all in Redis just seems like a whole lot of work for not much benefit. So that's why. So it's kind of using the best tool for the job.
No, I was asking because I wrote Redis stat.
Okay.
You've seen it?
Yeah, I think I did see it.
We are kind of using it a bit above what it was originally intended for at the moment, but it's still working good for us. So.
Right. You're doing the modulo on the timestamp or something when you record or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it breaks it down into each timestamps by year, month, day, so on, as it's writing into Redis.
Yeah. Okay, I'll talk to you later. It's an interesting approach, but I'm wondering, I think there's, not sure if it would quite work for us, but
yep.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Really good.